I'm Orly Yadin, the Executive Director of the Vermont International Film Foundation, VTIFF. I chose The Bigamist for two main reasons. I found the treatment of the subject highly unusual, and I personally find Ida Lupino's professional life very intriguing. Lupino was born in London, England, almost 100 years ago, in 1918, we think. That's at the end of the First World War. She was born in London, England, into a theatrical family. The Lupinos were well known in the music hall and on the stage. So from a very early age, she was already exposed to acting. And by the time she was 13 years old, she already appeared in 5 films. Paramount Studios in Hollywood spotted her talent and snatched her away in 1934, brought her to Hollywood, where she was given various roles. But Lupino set her sights high and was dissatisfied with what she thought were mainly decorous roles. So she decided not to act for them and refused, and moved to Warner's, who were well known for making edgier films, and then continued to act at Warner Studios in what had become the film noir period. But even then, she wasn't very satisfied. She always set her sights higher. So even though she appeared in Raoul Walsh's They Drive by Night, and in High Sierra, still she wanted to do more. She wanted to be more active and have more of a say in the kind of films that were put out. Her then husband was Collier Young, a producer, and both of them together formed a production company and started making their own films, which Lupino very quickly started writing, producing, and directing. But my focus tonight is really on Lupino as a writer and as a director. Think film noir. The golden age of film noir was really started probably in 1941 with The Maltese Falcon and ended around 58 with The Touch of Evil. And while she continued acting during that time, as she had to support herself, she started making films in that style. Very moody lighting, amazing location shots, and dealing really with the underbelly of American society. However, unlike most of the other directors working in that period and in that style, I would say she almost subverted film noir, even though she adopted the style, the cinematic style of that period and of that genre, if you like. Her focus was almost the opposite of most other film noir films. If you, as I'm sure you know, in film noir, you usually have a femme fatale and a really hard-boiled male detective. Well, with Ida Lupino, it was quite the opposite. Her main focus was really on the male psyche, and she had no femme fatales in her film, nor did she have any hard-boiled detectives. When Lupino died in 1955, all the New York Times obit had to say about her directing career was a brief mention. It focused mainly on her acting, and it just said, and she went on to direct a few films and television series. In fact, she did go on to direct to the end of her life. It was only in the 1970s that her whole career was reassessed by film historians and film critics. In 1976, for example, Richard Kosarsky notes that, I quote, "Her films display the obsessions and consistencies of a true auteur." And in 2009, Professor Wheeler Winston Dixon writes, "Lupino was one of the most important auteurs in 1950s cinema." So a huge shift after her death. You've got to remember that the fact that she was a woman director, although I won't really dwell on it too much, was really quite an achievement at the time, and actually even today we read from the statistics. But when she was working, there was only one other, Dorothy Arzner, who was directing her own films. So it was quite unique and quite an achievement. But what was special about the films she directed? You could say that in almost all the 6 films she directed, the main male characters, the men, were analyzed and dissected. Their masculinity was put under the microscope, if you like. And rather than have these macho personalities, their fragility was exposed. And that's true of more or less all her films. I'm not going to venture an opinion about whether Lupino was a feminist or not. The jury is still out on that. But one thing I have to say about the Bigamist especially, I cannot imagine a man making exactly that kind of film. And the story in brief, and don't worry, I'm not giving the plot away, this is not a spoiler. The whole plot is already in the title, The Bigamist. And Lupino actually is very, very efficient. She gets right to what interests her in the film. The establishing shot, the very first scene, apart from one amazing ominous location shot in Los Angeles, is basically a couple who are both married and professionally a couple, are in an adoption bureau. So right away, you know that they are childless. They are both professionally associated, and they are married. And almost instantly, you realize that the man has something to hide. Almost the second scene after that, we already get to meet his second wife. So as I said, that is probably in less than 10 minutes, that is the plot. Here is a man, his first wife doesn't know about it. We meet his second wife, played, by the way, by Ida Lupino. The first wife is played by Joan Fontaine. And now we really get to the crux of the matter. Who is this man? How did he get himself into this situation of having two wives? Why does he appear so weak? And then from now on, most of the film is told in flashback, from the man's point of view, in first person, in a monologues. He's actually telling it to the adoption agent, I guess, but it really feels like a monologue, and it's from his point of view. Occasionally, we, the audience, are privileged to see both women, the Ida Lupino character and the Joan Fontaine character, the two wives, without him. So we have a sense of who they are, even not from his point of view. But most of the film is from his point of view, how he perceives them, his needs. And what is amazing is that as he tells his story, you realize that there is an unspoken blame on the first wife, that it is her success as a professional woman, because she actually became more successful than he was, that made her less caring as a housewife, as a wife, potentially as a mother, even though they have no children, and maybe that is even something she is to blame for, we don't know, that drove him to loneliness and into the arms of another woman. However, in most conventional, certainly Hollywood films of that period and even later, the other woman would have been demonized. Not only that, we have the most extraordinary plot element, if you like, that the other woman, the second wife, if you like, became pregnant. So we have an incidence here of pregnancy out of wedlock. Now remember, this is the 1950s. This did not happen on film. And here, it's absolutely extraordinary that there is no judgment of this woman. If we did see women out of wedlock become pregnant or have children out of wedlock in the films of the time, they would have been punished. They would have been considered fallen women, but not here, not in The Bigamist. The two women are strong and sympathetic characters, and they are not judged. And that is the other amazing thing about the film for me, is that Lupino, even though she shows us the fragility, if you like, of the man's sense of his loss of masculinity, according to his interpretation. Because what is his masculinity? And it's repeated several, the word isn't used in the film, but the reasons are mentioned or alluded to in the film, that he, as a man, his role is to protect women. He needs to be needed by a woman, and that validates him as a man. But these women and the first wife, they don't need him, or he thinks they don't need him. They don't need him in the conventional sense. So therefore, he falls apart, and he just doesn't know what to do, and he's weak. But none of the three characters are judged in the film. And that is really another very, very interesting aspect in this film. There's no punishment. Even we don't know, and that is almost towards the end of the film. We don't know how. He is brought to court because he finally is caught, and he has broken the law. Bigamy is illegal in the United States. But we don't know. The film finishes before sentence is passed. And that is so intriguing. We don't know what's going to happen. And the two women are still alive. We haven't dispatched the second wife to a miserable death. They're both alive. They're both smiling. Maybe they've forgiven him, maybe not. We don't know. And that's how the film ends. That's how life is. We don't know. There is nothing. It's a film noir without having noir meaning black, without being black and white. It's all shades of gray. It's all open to interpretation. It's all open to our interpretation. And Lupina leaves the film as an open topic. Enjoy the film.